this episode, we're going to connect network design to a question that every security team eventually faces. Where do you actually get the evidence you need to detect trouble and understand what happened? Beginners often imagine monitoring as a single tool that watches everything, but in real environments, visibility comes from many small signal sources that each see a different slice of reality. A monitoring-ready architecture is a network and system design that makes those signals available, reliable, and meaningful, instead of scattered, missing, or impossible to interpret. This matters because detection is not just about having alerts. It's about building a story from clues, and you can't build a story if your clues are incomplete or easy to tamper with. We'll talk about what signals exist, where they naturally appear, and why certain collection points give you better coverage than others. By the end, you should be able to picture a network as a set of observation opportunities, not just a set of connections. A helpful way to start is to define what we mean by a signal in security monitoring. A signal is any observable event or measurement that suggests what is happening in a system, a network, or an application, such as an authentication attempt, a connection to an unusual destination, a change to a critical setting, or an unexpected process starting. Signals can be high confidence, like a clear indication of a malware detection, or low confidence, like a brief spike in network traffic that might be normal or might be suspicious. The key idea is that you rarely get a single perfect signal that proves an incident, so you rely on multiple signals that support each other. That's why collection matters. If you only collect one type of signal, you will have blind spots. Good monitoring architecture spreads collection across layers, so that when one signal is unclear, another can provide context. This layered view is especially important as more traffic becomes encrypted, making some network-level observation less detailed. The next concept is that signals appear naturally at boundaries, and boundaries are often the best places to observe. A boundary is anywhere traffic or activity must pass through a controlled point, such as between network zones, through a firewall, into a remote access gateway, or through a proxy. These choke points are valuable because they concentrate activity, making it easier to log and correlate. If every device can talk directly to every other device without passing through anything observable, monitoring becomes fragmented and inconsistent. When the architecture forces important flows through a small number of paths, you can place sensors and logging there and capture a large portion of what matters. This is a major reason segmentation and monitoring readiness go together. Segmentation doesn't just limit attack movement. It creates seams where observation becomes easier. Network devices themselves are major signal sources because they see traffic patterns and policy decisions. Firewalls can log allowed and blocked connections, which tells you not only what happened, but what would have happened if policy were different. Routers can provide flow information about who talked to whom and how much data moved, which can be valuable even when payloads are encrypted. Switching infrastructure may offer visibility into which devices were present and where they connected, which matters for tracking unmanaged devices and sudden changes. Domain Name System, DNS, infrastructure can reveal which domains devices attempted to resolve, which is often a powerful early indicator for malicious activity because attackers frequently rely on external infrastructure. The key is that each device has a different view. A firewall sees boundary crossings, a router sees routing flows, and a DNS resolver sees name lookups. Monitoring-ready design makes sure those devices are positioned and configured so their logs reflect meaningful control points. Endpoints, meaning user workstations and servers, are another essential signal source because they see what network devices cannot. An endpoint knows which user is logged in, which processes are running, and what files are being accessed, which is crucial when you need to understand intent. If you only watch the network, you might see a connection to a suspicious destination, but you may not know which program created it or which user initiated it. Endpoint logs can show authentication attempts, privilege changes, service creation, scheduled tasks, and many other actions that attackers use. Endpoints also provide the best view into lateral movement, because an attacker often uses built-in system capabilities to move internally in ways that look normal on the network. A monitoring-ready architecture assumes endpoints will be monitored, and it plans for how logs are generated, protected, and forwarded so they cannot be easily erased or altered by an attacker. Identity infrastructure deserves special attention because identity is often the true perimeter in modern environments. Authentication systems generate high-value signals such as successful logins, failed logins, password changes, account lockouts, and token issuance. These signals help you answer critical questions like whether a user's account is being brute forced, whether a stolen password is being used from an unusual location, or whether privileged accounts are being accessed unexpectedly. Identity signals also help connect network activity to real people, which is essential during incident response. A monitoring-ready design ensures that authentication events are centrally collected and time-synchronized so sequences can be reconstructed accurately. It also ensures that privileged authentication events are especially visible, because attackers typically aim for privilege escalation, and the earlier you see that trend, the better your chances of containment. Applications and services produce their own signals, and these are often the ones that explain what data was touched. Web applications can log requests, errors, and unusual patterns like repeated failures or strange input, which can indicate probing or exploitation attempts. Databases can log queries, login attempts, and changes to schema or permissions, which can reveal data access beyond what a normal user would do. Email systems can log login behavior, forwarding rules, and unusual sending patterns, which is useful because email accounts are frequent targets. The challenge is that application logs are often inconsistent and noisy, so monitoring-ready architecture includes standardization and careful selection of what matters. Even beginners should recognize that network logs can show that a connection existed, but application logs can show what action occurred, and that difference matters when you need to assess impact. Now let's talk about where to collect signals, because collection is about location and also about structure. Central collection matters because if logs stay only on the device that created them, an attacker who compromises that device can often delete or alter the evidence. Centralizing logs makes it harder to erase history, and it supports correlation across systems, which is how you detect complex attacks. A monitoring-ready architecture, therefore, includes a pipeline where logs are forwarded to a central place, with access controls and integrity protections. Time synchronization is part of this, because logs from different systems are only useful together if timestamps align closely. If your firewall thinks it is one time and your server thinks it is another, you can misinterpret the sequence of events. In security, sequence is often the difference between understanding and confusion, so time consistency becomes a design requirement, not an optional detail. A beginner-friendly way to think about signal placement is to cover three categories: edge, internal seams, and critical assets. The edge includes internet-facing boundaries like inbound and outbound gateways, where you see external interactions and policy enforcement. Internal seams are zone boundaries where lateral movement would cross, which helps you detect attackers moving from compromised user devices towards sensitive systems. Critical assets are systems that, if compromised, would be high impact, such as identity services, core databases, and management infrastructure. Each category offers different signal value. The edge shows exposure and external threats, seams show internal spread, and critical assets show high-consequence actions. Monitoring-ready design tries to cover all three because attackers can enter at the edge, then move internally, and then act on critical assets. If you only monitor one category, you may see pieces but miss the full arc of the attack. Encryption complicates monitoring because it reduces visibility into content, but it does not eliminate useful signals. When traffic is encrypted, network sensors may not see the payload, but they can still see metadata like source, destination, ports, timing, and volume. These metadata signals can be surprisingly powerful, especially when combined with DNS signals and endpoint context. For example, a sudden connection from a workstation to an unusual country, or a spike in outbound data volume at an odd hour, can be meaningful even without reading content. Monitoring-ready architecture therefore adapts by collecting more endpoint and identity signals, while using network signals for patterns. It also encourages placing sensors at points where traffic can be safely inspected if policy allows. But the bigger lesson is that monitoring evolves with the environment. You design for what you can reliably observe, and you accept that no single sensor sees everything. It's also important to understand the difference between collecting everything and collecting what you can actually use. Beginners sometimes assume more logs are always better, but uncontrolled logging can drown you in noise, consume storage, and make investigations slower. Monitoring-ready design includes decisions about what events are high value, what needs to be retained longer, and what can be sampled or summarized. It also includes careful attention to log quality, meaning consistent fields, meaningful identifiers, and enough context to be actionable. A log that says something failed is less useful than a log that says who, from where, to what, and why it was denied. Quality signals make detection more accurate and investigations faster. The goal is not maximum data, it's maximum understanding. Another critical design idea is resilience of monitoring, meaning monitoring should keep working even when parts of the environment are stressed or under attack. Attackers often try to disable logging, overwhelm collectors, or exploit blind spots created by outages. A monitoring-ready architecture anticipates that and avoids single points of failure, making sure critical logs can still be captured and forwarded even if one component is unavailable. It also includes access controls so that attackers who compromise one system cannot easily alter central logs. From a beginner perspective, the simplest takeaway is that monitoring is a security system too, so it needs protection like any other critical system. If you treat monitoring as an afterthought, it becomes the first thing that disappears when you need it most. As we wrap up, remember that monitoring-ready architecture is not about a specific product, it's about designing for observation. Signals come from network boundaries, endpoints, identity systems, and applications, and each one answers different questions about what happened and why. The best collection points are often choke points and seams because they concentrate activity and align with policy decisions, making logs both richer and easier to interpret. Central collection, time synchronization, and integrity protection make signals trustworthy and usable during real incidents. Encryption changes what you can see, but it does not remove the value of metadata and layered signals, especially when you combine network, endpoint, and identity views. If you can learn to see a network as a place where evidence should flow naturally to defenders, you will design systems that are not only harder to attack, but also easier to understand and recover when something goes wrong.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.